We're going to learn about the verb possum, passe, potui, blank. No fourth principal parts, so only 3 forms to remember for this one. And the possibilities are endless with the things we can do with this verb. Okay, so a little retrieval on the meaning. We've actually seen and used this word before when we speak Latin in conclave. Many of us have asked possumne ire ad latrinam, or also, possumne bibere aquam. And when people ask this, if someone was maybe a little immature, they might respond, nescio, potesne. Try and think about what the word possum or potes means here using these phrases. And maybe you got this, that it means I am able or you are able, those 2 forms. And so we're going to use this verb all the time, right? We're going to use it whenever we want to say that we or someone is able, can do something. Think about how often you use can in English. A great campaign thing, itawero possum, or itawero possumus. Yes, we can. The goals of this presentation, by the end of this video, we want the following possum statements to be true. Possum to form the Latin verb for can be able in all persons / number in the present tense. Possum, I'm able, to recognize the Latin for can be able in all its present forms. So not only be able to form the verb possum, but when we see it in a sentence, to be able to recognize it. Possum, to see similarities between sum and possum conjugation in Latin. So we want to be able to connect those 2 in our brains so it's less individual, new, unique remembering that we have to do. And possum, to say in Latin that I can do something. All good goals, all right? So first off, let's start by retrieving our sum forms. So we worked on this in class recently. Why don't you take a second and pause the video and try and produce these forms on your own, okay? So here they are. So you can check what forms you wrote down. And yes, these are the forms of sum. Sum, I am. S, you are. Est, she, he, it is. Sumus, we are. Estis, y'all are. And sunt, they are. Moving ahead. Possum, posse, potui, blank. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. Dang it. Well, maybe you didn't see all those forms. See if you could try and form the forms of possum, knowing that these are going to be the base, right? We did this in class the other day. You can pause the video and try and do that. What makes sense? See if you can retrieve that. And then we'll look at the forms here. So you may remember the pattern that we see here. It's just the forms of sum ss, sumus estis, sunt, and we're just attaching a stem, a new stem, pos or pot, ahead of it. It's going to be pot if it's a form of sum that began with e, and it's going to be pos if it's a form of sum that began with an s. But remember, pos is the stem, so there should be 2 s's. The s that began the form of sum, and the s at the end of that stem, pos. Okay, so possum. I am able. You are able. He, she, it is able. We are able. Y'all are able. They are able. Or I can, you can, he can, we can, y'all can, they can. Okay? All right. Now let's look at some exempla. Try and translate all these sentences below. Keep in mind, in English, when we use the verb can, we're always going to follow it with another verb, right? We want to find out what can you do. When we use I am able, I am able to do something, the form of that verb is more apparent or obvious, maybe, if we remember how to say to verb in Latin. But if you want to use you can, that's fine. Just remember that possum is always going to work with this type of verb that we see right here. Try and think and see if you can remember what we call this type of verb, and I'll tell you in a second. So we call this verb the infinitive. All right? Try and circle or identify the other infinitives in the sentences below that are going to work with the verb possum. And then begin to translate, okay? Keep in mind, when we read a Latin sentence, we should read the entire thing and look and find that verb. One of the things we really want to pay attention to is the verb and see what is its ending, because that's going to tell us what the subject is. And if it's not a T or an NT, then we know that the subject is going to come directly from the verb automatically, right? We're not going to have to go find a nominative out there. So we're going to just start with the verb. All right, just a couple hints. Pause the video and try and answer these, and then we'll go over them together. All right, here they are. Potes entrare. Maybe I'll do this without. You can enter, okay? You can, potes, you are able to enter. Down here we have possumus, so it's we are able. Subject coming from the verb. Servare, infinitive, so what are we able to do? We are able to save, or we can save. Vitas, accusative, direct object. We are able to save lives. Down here we have liberi docere possunt. When I hear possunt, I hear that NT. So a plural third person. So I could have a nominative plural subject. And I look back and, liberi with an I, that can be nominative plural. So I say the books are able to teach, or books can teach. Okay? And then finally down here, we have memoria servari potest. And I see, that's a T ending. So do I have a singular nominative earlier in the sentence? Yeah, I do, right here, memoria. That has to be nominative. It's memoria, memoriae. So I know that memory is able to, and it's no longer servare. So it's not memory is able to save. It's servari. Remember how that changes the meaning of this form? Think back to some exercises we did last chapter. It's the passive infinitive. So we're going to say memory is able to be saved, or memory can be saved. Okay? All right, and we'll look at these all together. If you want to write them down in your notes, they're good practice. Written both possible translation patterns. And moving on. You can pause the video if you want to write these down. All right, alia verba with infinitives. Other words with infinitives. So possum, we notice, always is going to have that infinitive following it. So when we see a possum, we want to go find the infinitive that's working with it. Similarly, soleo and debeo are going to take infinitives. So when we see these verbs, we're 9 times out of 10 going to want to find the infinitive to translate next. So keeping that in mind and checking your your textbook for the definitions in chapter 6, if you've forgotten them, try and translate these sentences below. Pause the video if you want time to work on them, and then I'll talk about them. I'll walk you through them, okay? All right, so auxilium dare debes. I read the whole sentence, and I hear debes, OS ending, so I have my subject from the verb. That's going to make it easier. You ought, you have to give. You have to give, you ought to give. Auxilium, you ought to give aid. So auxilium here, even though it's neuter, so it could be nominative or accusative, I'm going to translate as accusative because I already have a subject, right? The subject's you, so this can't be nominative. So you ought to give aid. Down here, bene habitare solemus. I hear solemus, so I know, I can start from the verb, right? My subject's going to be we. We are accustomed to live well. We are accustomed to living well. And I know because it's soleo, I got to go find that infinitive first. That's how I know to translate solemus habitare bene. Another just great reminder that we just want to keep track of with these verbs is that in Latin, we want to resist the urge to always translate left to right. We want to read left to right and note endings. But then when we translate, we have to be more open to realizing that in the English translation, the word order might not match the Latin translation. Okay? All right, and just looking at those translations, here they are. So now you're going to go and work in your workbook with some additional practice on these terms if you check the portal page. Have a great rest of your weekend day.